Okay, so you two are both okay with being recorded?
Yes.
Provisionally.
I'm good whenever.
Lawrence, are you ready? Okay, okay.
I value morality to determine the right answer to any question. First, we consider what makes the answer right. Second is the best way to determine the right answer. Study calculus may help understand what makes one answer correct. Plugging the question in whole from alpha may be more likely to get me the correct answer. Medical research may give me the tools to know what my symptoms mean. Consulting a doctor is still more reliable to diagnose the illness. This is a distinction between analytic and regulative epistemology. Analytic seeks to enumerate those conditions by which one can satisfy the reductive criteria of knowledge. Regulative epistemology recognizes the plurality of epistemic projects and devotes itself to how we should practically make decisions. It is a question of intellectual virtue skills one should inculcate should they think well. Wilton Roberts 1. The triviality of standard epistemology is examples due to historical preoccupation with skepticism. Epistemology's most productive moments arose because philosophers willing to set aside worries and look at what ordinary practitioners were willing to call knowledge. Intellectual virtues of the kind that seem like to have relevance to emphasis on virtues in relation to epistemic growth has potential to put epistemology in its rightful place. Continued analytic epistemology aims to produce theories of knowledge perceived by attempting to define terms. Regulative epistemology tries to generate guidance for epistemic practice. Regulative epistemology is a response to deficiencies in epistemic conduct and strongly as a practical and social rather than just a theoretical challenge. People's intellectual lives need to be reformed. Since we are all short-sighted, we need to learn the habit to consult others whose opinions differ from our own and be great outsider discipline. Rule-oriented epistemology provides procedural direction for acquiring knowledge. Regulative epistemology aims less at direct regulation of epistemic context and habits of mind. We need not rule books, but training that happens in question our virtues. Regulative epistemology is not aiming at acquiring fundamental disagreement. Virtues presuppose one or another particular metaphysical background. Thus, any educational activity should pursue intellectual virtues. Virtues such as humility require uncognitive limitation to epistemic authority of experts. We need to learn what authorities to trust, not move away from trust in authorities. Woods and Roberts 2. Humans believe what we're totally dependent must depend on testimony of others with others. Natural tendency children get started in cognitive lives. They continue given limitation the way things go according to cognitive design plan. The early modern tendency to prescribe general suspicion of test or tradition. Testimony could be regarded as an endorsement of epistemic arrogance. The virtues of intellectual humility could be regarded as liberation of credulity, disposition for unwarranted intellectual suspicion. Thus, the standard is appealing to qualified moral authorities. While it's impossible to give a reductive account of what a qualified authority is, a useful heuristic to determine what an authority is to see if they've shown a proper moral clarity in times of moral confusion. To clarify, 1, the framework doesn't argue the content of moral rules is that we should follow testimony, rather it's a heuristic for obtaining moral knowledge. That means the next standard is to prove the truth of an ethical theory are uncompetitive. If your framework is correct to qualified moral testimony would have already considered it. 2, testimony is inescapable. Any epistemic starting point would be impossible without some deference to others. We cannot even debate without trusting our authors, our language, believing our boundaries where Taproom says it is. That means that objection must prove some distinction. It means moral testimony is uniquely bad. 3, it's not a question of whether we appeal to authority or not, but rather which we appeal to. If we take an action without a moral authority's testimony, I don't renounce authority, but instead appeal to my own. That makes the arguments for why it's hard to determine the correct authority are not unique, since we don't when we don't use testimony, we have to justify using our own authority. Prefer additionally. 1, testimony is key to bringing awareness to oppression. It's more likely to do good than harm. Exchange 15. Testimony can serve as a way to learn what has value. Consider Melody has always thought they're saying you guys was harmless by believing her. Professor Melody began seeing her use of language as way for moral investigation. Become aware of how gendered language makes her feel silenced. Our moral commitments have the power to shape the landscape of our deliberation by forming what we see as valuable. It is from within practices and perspectives that we learn about what has value. We can apply the basic idea here to a more general defense of testimony. Matters that are salient to moral understanding are not grasped until there is accepted by way of testimony. 2, weighing appeals to intuitions ignore calculates. Intuitions are inescapable. Humor. It is reasonable to assume that things are the way they appear. Some appearances are stronger appearances can be intellectual as opposed to sensory. Illogical judgment rests on intellectual appearances. We see this not with our eyes, but with our intellect. Inquiry proceeds by assuming things are the way they appear until evidence is self-drawn from experiences arises to cast out. Even the arguments of the skeptic rest upon what seems to the skeptic to be true. Skip the 3rd point. Contention 1 is Mandela. Nelson Mandela was an internationally recognized advocate for peace in the political context surrounding development. He was an anti-apartheid advocate who served as South Africa's first black president and worked towards dismantling the institutionalized legacy of racism. Brookings Institute 05. Former president of the South African ANC, Mandela is a recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize, the Gandhi Peace Prize, and Presidential Medal of Freedom. Mandela will be supporting the Mandela Legacy Trust, a charitable structure designed to support his African-based bodies. And Mandela always a context experience. Mandela had experience from giving aid through a large organization who is uniquely qualified to determine the efficacy of assistance. We consensus winners of the Nobel Peace Prize, Gandhi Peace Prize, and Medal of Freedom are all carefully vetted and chosen by experts, which proves he's an authority of the highest degree. C turns colonialist argument since Mandela was from a super racist and colonialist country, yet he still affirms always neg authors. Mandela actually did good things and actually fought colonialism in real life instead of just being an ivory tower academic. He affirms Mandela 05. Progress must be deepened by concrete support from developed nations. At the heart of this positive relationship between Africa and the West is a new recognition of mutual obligation. Donor nations provide substantially greater economic assistance. Contention 2 is Obama. Barack Obama has unique political and international experience. He was the first black president of a super racist country, won the Nobel Peace Prize, and pretty much single-handedly reversed Bush's destruction. He affirms Wilson 10. Obama urged wealthy nations to development assistance for nations. Obama vacates pitches UN Millennial Development Goals Summit. Obama to audiences and to civil progress to the poorest countries can advance prosperity and security of people far beyond their borders. Obama weighs A as president of the U.S. He has unique experience on whether aid is good or not since the U.S. donates a lot. B, prefer testimonies who are people of color. This also applies to the other testimonies. Clifton. 14. By taking the leadership of people of color into the broader conversation, whites become allies. White people will never have the same understanding of directors or the perspectives of white people of color becoming saviors, not equal white. Voice of historically being given priority. Contention 3 is MLK. Martin Luther King Jr. is a pioneering figure in the civil rights and peace, winning a Nobel Peace Prize and studying the example of Indian freedom fighters like Gandhi. His work directly led to the passage of the Civil Rights Act. He affirms that King. 68. All the wealthy nations must see it as a moral obligation to provide capital to undeveloped areas. Every nations have only scratched the surface in their commitments. There must be a sustained effort. MLK weighs he had to show extensive moral clarity and had the bravery to stand up for his principle at risk of death. Under review. One half gets 1 year theory, otherwise the net can be infinitely abusive. The one has to make it impossible for me to win, which always on magnitudes is the cause of infinite abuse over multiple rounds. Also means you drop the radar on 1 year theory and don't give the net an RVI 2 hour times means you can draw the argon and root ballot, or be back at 6 minutes to an earth collapse, so it would be impossible to check abuse time to do. Waste is quantifiable, verifiable, unlike other links to fairness.
Actually, I won't be truth testing. I'll send you this card after. Actually, no, I will be truth testing.
The three are true fairness of the voter debates confederate actually the press objective evaluation. Always substance you can evaluate to evaluate who best met the role of that Brown skewed. 3 the role of the judges to evaluate the substance on truth or falsity of the best vote. F is true and negative, it's false, A ground. Anything else is negative, infinite ground, including pick, stop, C, etc., which makes it impossible to affirm. B textuality affirm means to say something is true, and negate means to show something to be wrong. So the textual brain is F and negative truth testing.
I didn't read the last part.
Okay.
Ready for cross?
Yeah.
Okay, how do we determine who are moral authorities?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, the heuristic that I use is if they've shown proper moral clarity in times of moral confusion, i.e. when they've shown that they knew that they did the right thing and knew what the right thing was.
How do we know if
and
that was the
tried to-
right thing?
I mean, it's just pretty obvious. Like, are you going to contest that, like, what MLK does,
Sure,
or
but
what
like-
MLK did was good, or that, like, ending apartheid was good? It seems like we obviously have intuitions, which is also the humor argument, and, like, it's just absurd to say that we could not determine whether certain things are good or not.
Okay, so doesn't
also,
that make us like authorities on who's moral authorities based on whether or not they did good things?
Wait, sorry, what?
Like, if you're saying that you're appealing to our intuitions as to what is moral, doesn't that make us like the justifiers of who is moral authority? Doesn't that make it circular?
How does that make it circular?
Like, if
Wait,
we
I don't see
determine who
logic
a
in
moral
that.
authority is, like, how does that work?
What do you mean? I'm very confused. We can still know basic moral facts. Like, but the point is that when we apply these facts to the real world, things get more complicated, which means we need to consult some sort of heuristic, which is what testimony does. I'm confused about what you're saying about it being circular. Like, you
Sure.
need to explain your argument more, because I really cannot
Let's
see-
just, in that case, so I'm so confused. How do we establish who is and who is not a moral authority?
If they have shown moral clarity in times of moral confusion with the proper authority, there are ways to weigh between authorities, and there's like just basic things we know about like certain people being good and certain people being bad. Like, it seems completely absurd to say that we can't know if someone was good or bad at some point.
Okay, so what is the affirmative advocacy?
I would defend whole res. If you want me to spec something, I might be willing to do it. Like, do you want me to?
Sure, whole res is great.
Okay.
So let's go down to RBI issues. Why doesn't net get RBIs?
Because then you just collapse to it for 6 minutes and then 2 an R, and there's no way that I could win.
Okay, so that assumes that fairness is important, correct?
Sure.
So do you make any arguments as to like why the negative doesn't get theory?
I mean, I'd say you probably don't get 2 an R theory.
Okay. Let's go back up to moral authorities. So you say, like, what's the justification for like looking to morality in the first place?
Justification for looking.
Yeah.
I mean, the question, moral obligation is one type of obligation, right?
Okay.
And the resolution asks, nations have an obligation.
So if you prove like any type of obligation, does that affirm?
I'll only defend the moral obligation.
Okay. I'll just end cross. Starting prep now. right, stopping with 137 remaining.
What's the order?
Order is 2 off case, I think. So it should be sent. Is your stand already constructed?
Yeah.
Could I borrow it? Thank you. Everyone good?
Yeah.
The affirmative is littered with development discourse. They use phrases like developing countries and endorse development assistance. Development rhetoric creates the colonial idea that non-Western nations need to be tamed. Zhou 13. The concept of development has Eurocentric implications. European societies are referred to as developed in contrast to societies who deviate from this norm. Quote, less developed ones. They are framed linguistically as lacking, backwards, and inferior. The normative assumption neglects the downside of historical process of colonial industrial capitalism. From the perspective of the West, our society serves as a standard by which the inferiority of the quote-unquote less developed others identify. This implies that they have to become more like us. The project of, quote, developing the underdeveloped continues the one of civilizing the uncivilized. The other is constructed as inferior. This concept is tainted with the colonial notion of European superiority. Development rhetoric entrenches authoritarianism. Zhou 13. The concept of development has authoritarian implications because it prescribes intervention. It's based on the one particular conception, which is then used to be assumed to be universal, while other conceptions are subordinated. Development interventions are not needed legitimation by the people affected because they're seen as rational measures of a common interest legitimated through expertise. This is a direct link straight to the AC. They are legitimizing certain actions based on moral testimony of people that don't actually reside within these countries, which means that currently don't reside within the countries, means that it's being legitimated through the expertise of so-called moral experts. This is a definite link. Additionally, development rhetoric fails due to ignoring key features of the issues that are addressed in Zhou 13. The paradigm of development constructs social problems linked to lack of capital, knowledge, productivity, institutions that can be solved by programs of development. This perspective neglects differences between supposed beneficiaries, say ruling elites and marginalized groups. This perspective assumes that social problems can be solved by attacking the product solution, by reducing poverty to a technical problem. Poverty is depoliticized, so in combating poverty while avoiding political conflict, organizations try to eliminate the results of asymmetrical relations of power while not openly or questioning or attacking these institutions. Thus, the alternative: reject the affirmative's use of development discourse in favor of the concept of social change. To clarify, this is a pick. Zhou 13. We should be more precise in our language and in our practices of producing knowledge and legitimating policy. We don't have to talk about the processes of development. We can use the concept of social change in general, or we can use the more specific descriptions. There's no need to call this development. We can only designate this a global social policy. If we're striving for the world different of the present one, we should admit that we're guided by the ideals of justice and human rights instead of valuing the vague and problematic notion of development. The role of the judge is to be an educator. As an educator and a judge, you're obligated to reject speech acts that are epistemically flawed. If you're going to endorse the app, you damn well better be willing to endorse all of it. Vincent 13. For debaters, performance is always attached to their body, which is why it's important that performance be viewed in relation to the speech act. Our performance and our decisions in the round reflect the beliefs that we hold when we go back to our communities. Debaters must be held accountable for the implications of that speech. As educators in the debate stage, we must have an ethical obligation to foster the atmosphere of education. Judges must be willing to foster a learning atmosphere by holding debaters accountable for what they say in round. Until judges are comfortable enough to vote on debaters for performance that perpetuate violence in the debate space, debaters and coaches alike will remain complicit in their privilege. Next off is the NC. I negate. I value state sovereignty. The Free Legal Dictionary defines it as the power by which an independent state is governed, from which all specific political powers are derived. State sovereignty is the essential value from which all other legitimate functions of the government derive. The government derives constitutive obligations to the people from their state of sovereignty. Keenan 05. Obligations of governments are not the same as those of the individual. Government is an agent. Its primary obligations to the interests of the national society it represents. The interests are the integrity of the political life and the well-being of the people. They arise from the very existence of the national state in question and from the status that the national sovereignty enjoys. State sovereignty is a precondition to debating the resolution because only when a state has the ability to choose and implement a policy does it have agency. Additionally, the resolution lacks a describing word for the obligations. Thus, we must first look to the obligations that define the state. Additionally, state sovereignty is the only way that reflects communal freedom and decision. The moral process that the community allows itself reveals itself to the state. Roth writes, sovereignty takes on moral importance because fundamental human concerns necessitate uniquely political decisions. The state represents the need to structure social life effectively. Imperatives of equal concern and respect presuppose a discrete political community in which members make reciprocal demands. The capacity for such political decisions conceptually precedes all talk of democracy. The exercise of sovereignty is what they
appears to be democratic, but this hijacks any value of morality, because in order to have anything to be moral about, you need to have the ability to work within the state. Since general norms are derived from individuals rather than existing independently, we must respect deliberative procedures. Style 7, democratically basically amounts to a just society where individuals give themselves a law. Legitimacy of decisions must first and foremost rest on decision-making procedure. If an issue has been properly treated in fair process, those who are opposed to the outcome will nevertheless respect it as a legitimate constraint. The discourse principle establishes that legitimate decisions are those that can be consented to after withstanding scrutiny and critique. The democratically legitimate decisions have been defended, tested, criticized argumentatively in a public accessible debate, and minority positions have been included, listened to, and taken into account. This model has been successful in maintaining checks and balancing mechanism. Citizens are given participatory rights against political authorities. Thus, the standard is upholding democratic procedures. Contention 1. Development aid props up and empowers authoritarian regimes. Human Rights Watch 10. The effective development assistance solidified the one-party state that severely restricts the civil and political rights of citizens. Ethiopia has used development programs to expand and consolidate a party structure that depends on the center. The party and government have provided opportunities that have benefited loyal officials and civil servants. They encourage people to join the party by holding their livelihoods hostage. In the 2010 election, whatever the accuracy, it's clear that voting was explicitly linked to economic survival. Contention 2. Empirics prove development assistance degrades the quality of both economic and political institutions. Young 14. Institutional quality appears to be essential to economic growth, but aid can harm institutional quality. We analyzed a large panel of countries receiving official development assistance. The evidence suggests that aid flows are detrimental to both political and economic institutions. Aid flows are associated with deterioration of the legal system and property rights of the recipient country and the international trade freedom. Such deterioration can be associated with a large negative effect on growth. The increase in aid is associated with lower GDP growth of about 2 percentage points annually. Now the case on the value of morality. Identify your action is the only means aligning the act with the principle of your choice of action. But that's only possible if you know that your action is chosen on principle, not desire or course guard. To conceive of yourself as the cause of your actions, to identify it with the principle of choice on which you act. Suppose you have a desire to do A and B, but they are incompatible. You exercise this principle to do A and you regard the choice as your own activity. The only alternative is regarding the principle of choice as the third thing, and not the cause of your action. Agency requires identification with the principle of choice in which you act. Moral frameworks must presuppose being the cause of your action, because otherwise agents would never be responsible for the acts they take. Without responsibility, moral theories would fail because agents could just reject their obligations, and this negates nations aren't agents, they're aggregates, and so they can't resolve differences inside the political community, and B, they don't have any unified political will because of that aggregation. Additionally, the state doesn't act as an independent moral actor, which means that it can't have a moral obligation. And skip the second one. So now on to framing. You're going to be preferring sovereignty because this is going to be the most resolutional form, just because it lacks a modifier in the obligation, which means you have to look first to the arguments that define a state. Additionally, you're going to be we judge because we judge actions based we judge people's moral authority based on the actions they took, which means we have to look to empirical realities first. Insofar as the negative is reading empirical reasons why this is a bad thing, you can use your moral intuition to overrule certain other moral authorities, because we are going to be basing what a moral authority is based on empirical observations anyway. That was cross-sex. Additionally, it's regressive because we always know some moral truth. So insofar as I'm showing that the moral truth that people shouldn't be oppressed is true, you're going to be negating. Now onto the underview. The AF1AR theory is not drop the debater, because drop the debater is unreciprocal. 4 or 6 3 times 2 means that they have 7 minutes to debate theory, where I only have 6, which means that I'm actually at a disadvantage. Additionally, if I have to split my time between 2 layers, that means that they will always have the exact amount of time in the 1AR to respond, which means that negative is at the disadvantage here, which would also grant the RBI.
Okay, is Rindge ready?
Give me a second. Okay. And I didn't read the coin evidence.
Oh, okay. Alright, is everyone ready?
Yep.
Alright, if I prove that nations are agents, is that sufficient to affirm?
No.
Okay, great. How does the concept of social change solve anything? Why wouldn't that change just be to the Western conception of it?
Sure. So we say that the words developed, developing, and developed are all placing things on a spectrum of what is good and what is bad, and it places Western nations at the developed end, which is what developing countries are supposed to strive for.
Why won't social change also do that? Why won't we just say that they should be changed to some sort of Western standard?
Sure, but that's changed to some sort of Western standard. You can still have social change that doesn't reflect Western.
Okay, why can't we have development that doesn't reflect Western stuff?
Because
why can't development just mean giving people basic goods?
Because
like
it necessarily constructs this spectrum. Because you always have developed and developing countries.
We have changed and we have unchanged countries. How is that any different? It seems like you're just shifting around a word and then saying magically this will solve a history of colonialism. Where do you prove any of that?
Sure, there's nothing that says that change is good inherently in change. just because something changed doesn't mean it changed for the better. Like, we changed presidents, that doesn't mean that's a
Okay,
good
just because why does development necessarily mean good? Why can't it mean it developed to a worse state?
Sure, so it doesn't necessarily mean good, but it does necessarily place like developing countries as striving for development, because if you're developing,
Okay,
you are necessarily becoming
why
more
not?
developed.
Why aren't unchanged countries striving for change?
Sure,
It's
like you
not
don't
answering the
have to
question.
strive for change. Again,
You don't have to
change
strive
isn't
for
inherently
development.
good.
Okay, that's fine. You just there's let's see, state sovereignty.
Yeah.
Wait, so what type of obligation does this link to?
It links to the constitutive obligations of the state. Like,
Okay,
that's the
so
key
a
to
state
evidence.
obligation. So why does that just prove that we have a moral obligation?
Sure. So the disproving the moral obligation was the stuff I read on case. Additionally, Keenan would indicate like the only obligations that state have is like a obligation to its people.
Wait, it's a state and moral obligation? Or
Like
just-
it's just a state obligation.
Okay, that's fine. Why don't nations have a unified enough will in order to take actions?
Sure. So it's not that they can't take actions, but because it doesn't have a unified will, like it isn't going to be seeing itself as the cause, because there are always going to be like different parts of a fragmented agent that don't agree. So like the nation itself can't see itself
Okay.
as the cause of its action.
What was the first one for drop the invader? Or for drop the arc?
Drop the arc. You have 7 minutes. I only have 6.
Okay. I'll take pro.
And your stand. Sorry.
$130.
What's the order?
Order is true new off, case, NCK. Is everyone ready?
Two walkers.
Yeah. Okay.
Interpretation, the negative must not be an argument that says that states don't have obligation violation. That's exactly what they do on the frame exchange. One reciprocity. That is an if they say that if I answer that if I turn it, there's no way that I can turn it, which means it's sufficient for them to win, but not for me. Which means if there's a 2-1 burden to kills fairness. Reciprocity always points to late fairness. The definition you have reciprocal access to valid viewpoint. The structural abuse, it changes the structure of the ground instead of just making it substantially harder. Means that there's a clear bright line to it, which is the only thing that you can evaluate here. At times they make it they make it so if I spend enough time on it to answer, they can just take out of it, which moves the life portion of the 1 AR, which supercharged because the 1 ARs are due super time press, which kills fairness to cosplay the times go away since it's quantifiable and verifiable now. They continue the fairness and voter I'll get you off the debate later. Also, they continue competing in terms because it leads to a race help. Also, I'll get to RVIs later. Next off, enter of the neg must not be the word enter of the neg must not be the word pick violation. That's exactly what they do. They just change what the advocacy to social change violation. Standard one reciprocity or one reciprocity. I am bound by the resolution to only defend a certain type of word, but they can defend functionally any different type of word, which means that they have it means that they have structurally positions that I do not have access to. Cross-apply by reciprocity always 2 times you they or 2 times you they made all of the 1 AC since they can just take all off. It takes forces the 1 AR restart, which is the worst restarts, since it causes 13-7 times you kills fairness. Cross-apply the times you always also cross-apply the rest of the voter section. Now onto that. The role of non-church media encourage testimonial education. That's
Actually, it started in the underview.
First, I started they dropped the meter, dropped the arc suffix, and I can drop the meter since the 2 ARs too short to win, drop the arc and move value. They can see that always the magnitudes it means, so I wouldn't be able to check any of these. As far as they do not have any weighing arguments, you have to vote on that first. They also can see that means that they don't get 2 in our RVIs, because otherwise they'd be able to outspread me for 2 minutes and the 2 in R and be able to wait 3 and prep it out. Means I would never be able to check these. I also can see that weighs the magnitude. Insofar as I can see both of those weighing arguments, there's no way they can vote. And now they say that there is a disadvantage because I have a 7-6 times begs the question of if I spend all of the 1 AR on it, which I obviously didn't. You use 6 minutes to long enough to beat it back, especially since judges usually air neg on 1 AR 3-3. This is completely recircled because you could have just read 1 and C3, which would solve all this off. And they say they have to split time between the 2 different layers now, or they say they have to split time between the 2 layers, but the 6 minutes is long enough. It's way worse if the 2 AR has to split time between multiple layers because I only have 3 minutes to do it now. Onto that.
Okay.
The role of attribute encourage testimonial education with Roberts who indicates its unique responsibility of educators to cultivate this skill. It's necessary to pacify life because testimony is nevertheless simply how we live our lives. We need to learn what people trust doing so it can help prevent us from becoming brainwashed and oppressive neoliberal subjects. Means the case also the case because this method allows for the development of characteristics to prevent people from being able to be. With Roberts 1 indicates that this can allow us to become more accepting of other people's ideas, become more tolerant by virtue of embracing intellectual humility. See, testimonial authority controls the internal role of that because it's necessary to determine who best meets the role of that doesn't provide a clear measurement for this. Whereas sources the more likely to determine who's least oppressive also takes out their argument about intuitions. D, it's independently virtuous to inculcate humanity. This was Roberts 2, that's an external impact. 2, take case turns the K. Remember, the firm is epistemic and non-normative argument. My authorities would likely consider the K and the NC included. The app is still a good idea. They're much better source for us on the issue than a high school student. Now to the line. First talking about this argument about how states are more like agents. They say they're aggregates and there's no unified will one. Having the president solve because they're the ones who actually we can reasonably say if they acted on intent. For example, if it's pretty unanimous vote, fiat solves since I could just feel that all of them do it, which would just mean that they have a very clear intention to do it. Now they say that there's no modifier to sovereignty, but that doesn't matter. I only have to prove that there's one obligation per truth testing because the rest just says an obligation means under truth testing you would still textually affirm. They say that their authors come first because we need to focus on pure condition, but crossplay that we are not as reliable authorities. Yes, we have to rely on intuition sometimes, but as far as the world gets complex, we have to rely on moral authorities. Now to contention extend Mandela that he affirms, and also that he always turns the K because he was someone who actually fought against colonialism. Means he would be the best to know on these issues, and he still affirms, which also waste your evidence. You're just talking about professor. Now to K affirm the also affirm you the
Alt.
All right. I believe I have 147 remaining. That's all right. Okay, so
Oh, sorry. Starting now. What were the reciprocity outweighs arguments?
Strength of link and structural versus substantive abuse.
All right. Order is going to be the two theory shells in the order they were read. Would you like me to write down the counterinterps?
I mean, will it just be like the opposite?
Basically.
That's fine.
I mean, if not, you can ask me to write them down. That'd be great.
Okay.
Then the pick, AC, NC. Actually, wait. Two shells, AC, pick, NC. Everyone ready? Counterinterpretations. Negative debaters may read that states do not have moral obligations. I just read that states don't have moral obligations. Additionally, I meet his interp because I don't say that states don't have any obligations. I just say that states don't have moral obligations. He could still have generated offense under my state sovereignty NC, which means he just would have had to turn the contention, and that would have been sufficient to affirm. He doesn't ask in cross-ex if him winning that is contingent on winning the debate. He doesn't have to win that states have moral obligations. He just has to win that that this state obligation works. So it's definitely not a nib. You probably should have clarified more in cross-ex. So that's why I don't violate that. Additionally, next on to the word picks. Affirmatives may read a word pick of the resolution. Standards 1, you can you are not forced into defending the actual text of the resolution in an interpretation. When I asked you what the advocacy was, you could have said do stuff for social change. That still would have been affirming. You could just explain why that still counts as development assistance. Just because we have a definition of word doesn't mean that you actually have to use the word in your speech. You don't have to say the resolution in the speech. Neither of us did. That's pretty easy. Additionally, on the reciprocity, you definitely are reciprocal because I have an app plan text without any of the words, without development in any of the case. It's doable. So just saying that isn't bad. Additionally, reps are still going to come before this. Actually, on the time skew argument, so he says this moots the entirety of the 1AC. However, that is untrue. You should be able to defend the entirety of your rhetoric, which means that you can have preemptive reasons why your rhetoric is good in the AC. Just because there's going to be, it doesn't. You can have preemptive reasons in the AC, which means that time skew is definitely non-unique. Additionally, there's a reason to prefer that we may read the word pick of the resolution. It's going to be critical. It's going to be ground. Insofar as the negative can't read any of these reasons, or can't read. Insofar as the negative cannot critique the language of the affirmative, that's a large ground lost. If we can't say that your reps are bad, then that loses most of pre-fiat implications. So that's probably going to be important. Even if we agree with what the affirmative is doing, we should be able to say that your reps in particular are bad, not just the entire indict of the case. So that's going to be offense there. Don't let them extend competing interpretations as a reason to vote affirmative. Yeah. So now onto the AC, starting on the underview. He extends why this is drop the debater, hope he doesn't. respond to the RBI arguments made under this because it's a 463 times Q. I should be granted an RBI if I prove that I'm not abusive. There's a pretty clear I mean on the no state obligations thing, because I'm not saying that this definitely isn't a nib, and I'm just saying that that states don't have moral obligations, not that states don't have any obligations. So there's a reason to vote there. They're going to try and cross apply and say that the 6 minutes is never long enough to respond. However, that doesn't make it isn't cohesive against the RBI arguments. So they're just going to say that we it's key to check back abuse. This is also checking back abuse because it's a clearly frivolous theory. You could have clarified more in cross-ex. If there's an I meet on it, it's probably frivolous, so that's a reason to drop them. Additionally, you can extend the idea that this is going to be unreciprocal because this is going to be creating a time skew where they can up layer to 2 new layers that they have independent ways to weigh off of. So that's probably going to be reciprocity, which means I control the internal link there. And additionally, that's probably going to be outweighing any theory offense coming out of the word pick reciprocity because it's a clear violation of if I don't get RBIs, then it's not reciprocal on 2 layers. So that's probably bad. Now on to the pick. I'm not going to go for the pick. It was conditional. You probably should have asked. So now onto the state sovereignty evidence. You can extend the Keenan evidence. Talks about how states only have obligations that stem from their citizenry, which means that moral obligations do not affirm because they don't have these obligations. Then you can extend the ST evidence, which talks about how democracy is the best way to constrain state sovereignty in a way that is beneficial to the people. And then you can go down the Human Rights Watch evidence. This is cold conceded. You can extend the circle flow. How development aid actually empirically shows that people that it props up authoritarian regimes. This is a clear reason why it's going to be decreasing democratic procedures, which means that's a pretty easy negative ballot under the framing. You can also extend Young, which talks about how it decreases the economic and political institutions within a country, such as their judicial system, which is another thing that is bad for democratic procedures. There's clear offense under the NC framing. Now under the AC framing, even if you want to see a moral obligation, they don't respond to the idea that we judge whether or not somebody's a moral authority based on their empirical actions, which means insofar as I'm showing empirical reasons why development assistance is bad, that's probably sufficient to negate. So they are responding to like substantive weighing, so they probably can't go for substance. Yeah, so just a little bit of a clarification. So not going for the pick. State sovereignty is clear dropped offense that is extended. That is the only source of moral obligations, as shown by the Keenan evidence. That's not responded to as to like why states actually do have moral obligations. Even if they can be a moral actor, that doesn't mean they are obligated by it because they don't respond to Keenan. That's fully conceded. Theory is pretty easy. If you want to weigh abuse, you can probably weigh the RBI arguments that I make. That's like this is going to be unreciprocal if I don't get an RBI on these 2 things, which is going to outweigh. They make reciprocity outweighs, so that's going to outweigh any time skew arguments coming out of the no words pick shell. The I meet is pretty clear. Like it's not a nib because you could have just turned the NC. So then, yeah. So. Okay, and then on time skew, once again, this isn't going to be, so I'm going back to the word pick shell. I'm going to be generating a bit more offense. So word picks are unique, are once again uniquely good because this is the only way that allows us to critique their language without actually critiquing the endorsement that they do. They could get away with bad reps even if they have a good position by justifying that the consequences of the AF outweigh their reps, which is uniquely bad because it would allow for bad discourse within the debate space as long as it's justified with a plan. Just because you're allowed to use, yeah. So that's a unique reason like why that should be. So that yeah, thus I negate.
Order is the theory shells in order than the underview. Is everyone ready? Alright.
You should not get them an RBI on it. I will concede that that was just my mistake, but that is definitely not a reason. Definitely not a reason to drop me. That is absolutely ridiculous and illogical. Illogical that I should lose off of them off of some norm that is off of some norm that is good, but that they met. They have conceded all the offense from the theory shell. Proves that it was not frivolous. Just that I misunderstood their argument, which proves that there was no abuse whatsoever. Also, doesn't link into any of their time skew arguments because they just had to spend like 5 seconds with the 2 and R in order to answer. Which means I did not skew their time that much. Also, it was super easy to take out. Look, there's no reason to vote on this vote on an RBI on this. It wasn't frivolous since they conceded all the offense. This is a good norm. I just misunderstood the violation. Definitely not a reason to drop me under the points for the RBI. Also, insofar as they're conceding a bunch of weighing arguments from the other theory shell, that means that abuse would come before the abuse from the RBI. So go to there. Intermittent violation were conceded. He read a word pick down. Extend the reciprocity standard. I don't have the reciprocal ability to do that since development assistance and social change aren't the same thing. They say that's reciprocal because they have a plain text. They have a plain text without the same rhetoric. But the point is that wouldn't be topical insofar as you have arguments that I have conceded from the pick that show that development assistance and social change are two different and entirely separate things. That means that that would not be a topical advocacy. So you could have just read theory against me, and I wouldn't have been able to defend it. Now they concede the reciprocity away since they conceded the reciprocity away since it's the on strength of link to fairness. Since fairness is definitely having reciprocal access to ballot. Insofar as their ground argument, they didn't do any strength of link weighing to that or strength of link weighing from the RBI. That means that I definitely get access to this, and it weighs everything, even a slight risk that it is irreciprocal is sufficient for you to affirm. They also going from the times go offense, taking scoop 6 minutes of AC offense, forcing a 1 AR restart. They conceded that is the worst type of time scoop because it causes 13-7 time scoop, which also takes out the reward for the RBI about why there's a 4-6-3 time scoop because that would just be a 7-6 time scoop versus a 13-7, which is obviously versus 13-7, which is obviously worse. Now they say they should be able to defend it because I can just preempt these arguments. The point is I can never tell what sort of word picks it really could be any type of word pick, and I would have no idea what to defend. The point is that you they say that social chain is the same as development assistance, so I would have been able to do it. But no, all their arguments on the case prove that development assistance and social chain are not different, are completely different things. Now the only thing that they can go for is this ground argument, but completely non. You could still critique my language. The point is you can't do it as a word pick. All of my offense is specific to word picks, whereas they're just saying why in general it's good for them to be able to critique my use of words. Fine, that is fine that they can critique my use of words. They just can't be a word pick that would scoop all of my offense, which is obviously irreciprocal. Also, at best, all these arguments are just defensive, which means under competing in terms you would still vote AF. And also I'm winning on strength of link. They never justified why ground is important. Also, they didn't provide why this is key neg ground. Why this is key neg ground specifically. So it doesn't link to fairness. Now onto the RBI segment. The only thing that they can go for is this reciprocity argument. But no, you could have read theory as well in the 1 and 2. That was a conceded argument from the 1 year. Also, you could have just answered my arguments and go for because the 2 and R is longer. Good round.
Good round.
Okay. Congrats. It's a 2-1 for the negative. So I sat. It's a low point win for the AF. I think there's a lot of leftover issues to resolve, but I kind of figured I was going to sit anyways. So the main thing is that I don't think the neg has much offense in terms of fairness here. Most of your offense on the theory debate in terms of the Pick's argument is education, but there isn't really an education motor that's sort of made in either speech. And while this isn't really easily pointed out by the AF as a sort of framing issue argument, I do find it hard to say like there is some proactive reason your interpretation is good. The best argument I have in terms of offense for your counter-interp in terms of fairness is this ground argument, but I do at least agree with the AF's characterization that most of this argument isn't as phrased as persuasively as it needs to be, because your arguments just are like reps are good to debate about, but you didn't take it the extra step, which is like only with word picks do we really focus on reps, because absent that sort of ability to only focus on language, the AF will always just go for the AF outweighs the representations, and we never debate about this important part. And so that ground argument isn't as impacted as I think it needs to be, because if you had done that, I think that you're pretty clearly ahead in this debate. The RBI's debate is irrelevant, and then I think that the AF has this like reasonably persuasive argument that you sort of do moot 6 minutes of the 1AC. The best other piece of defense you have is that you didn't have to say development assistance in the plant text, and this argument is a little bit confusing on both sides because I don't really know which way this flows, but I am at least marginally more persuaded that the AF is probably bound by topicality to have to defend the word and the sort of representations that word associates with it, just because it is in the resolution, even if it's not in the plant text, but it is throughout the entirety of the AF, especially since all of your links are not just to the plant text, but to the AF's links or usage of the sort of term throughout the AF. I think if you just like explain either as education as a voter or just like explain why word picks are crucial negative ground and picks specifically are key, then you've got this debate in the bag, but just absent that like little bit of extra things, I'm compelled to vote affirmative. Now here's the reason why it's a low point win. One is the 2AR's incredibly inefficient at kicking out of the nibs shell. Two, there's no framing issues that make it particularly easy to decide what offense matters more. The best I have is this like reciprocity outweighs argument, but that's like, it's just like on strength of link to fairness, but you don't do any of the sort of top level fairness first versus education, comparison of mooting of the 6 minutes of the 1AC versus this negative ground, because if I assume that negative ground is good, then it might be the opportunity cost of mooting the 1AC might just be because you wrote a bad 1AC in the first place. Like all of these arguments need to have much more comparison. I'm also really light on some of these paradigm extension arguments, like is it drop the debater versus drop the argument? The only reason I'm compelled to think it's drop the debater is because it wasn't contested in the 2NR, but this also needs to be pointed out in the 2AR. And also, like, this RBI's debate also seems like an inefficient use of the 2AR, because, like, if you're going for theory, who cares if they get the RBI? If you win the shell, you win the shell, and if you don't, then you lose it. So, like, then you lose the debate anyways. But at the same time, like, it's not that difficult to imagine a negative ballot, because if I slightly lower my threshold for, like, what counts as an offense under fairness, or, like, this reps first stuff, then, like, I can easily envision voting negative. So that's why it's a low point. Yeah.
You want to go first, or should I? You should. All right. Read a paradigm, dude.
Yes.
Like, this is, Lawrence knows he's going to sit because you have two judges who basically say, I'm not going to listen to theory. And you collapse the theory at the end. Like, paradigmatically, first words out of your mouth in the 1AR, I start writing my ballot. Or in the 2AR, right? Because you say, all right, I'm going to go for the two shells and then extensions from the underview. And it's like, oh, one side has, like, substance, easy peasy. I don't have to think anymore. Both of you are kind of going way too much in there. And I actually think the AF had some extensions coming off the top going to the roll of the ballot that I'm willing to vote for. Because, like, no, you're massively mishandling roll of the ballot here. I don't think you're ever addressing it. I do think you have some options there to say that, like, look, my authors are authorities too. They might have a different kind of narrative, like you can answer back some of the analytics stuff, but that's not done. Like I said, I think AF has like clear extensions you could make at the substance level, and like, yeah, for Lawrence you probably have to engage at least a little bit on the theory level, but it would be fine to go just for substance with him. And if you want all three ballots, that's probably what you want to do. You can't ignore 2 out of 3 judges. Like, that's just a bad strategic decision if you want to win the round. So I didn't have to think too much. It was pretty easy. You know, like, and I don't think the negative was that great. Like, even the theory violations, like, when you read that 2 people are willing to listen to kind of like pre-fiat weirdish arguments, they're probably not going to go for anything that says, well, we can't have these discourse arguments that's coming out of the pick. And like, come on, the neg is one of the most stock positions out there. So when you have 2 people saying, well, I'll go for reasonability, you're not going to win that argument, right? So you're both making strategic decisions. And you should be pointing this out, Noah. You should know our paradigms. Like, all of you should read the paradigm. If you point that out on those 2, you're spending like 10 seconds to get 2 valid, like knock out the theory for 2 of the 3 judges. And then you don't need to spend as much time. So I just think that was massive misuse of time for both of you.
I agree. I look at the theory debate and I just shake my head. It's like, I don't want to go through this forest. I don't want to do it. Please don't do this to me. I thought both of you badly mishandled it. I mean, I'm willing to vote in theory, but I don't want to because, to me, I don't think the 2AR answers get you out of mishandling the first shell, especially when there's a lot of voters there. I get the affirmative strategy there, but like, I do think there is a skew, but I don't particularly want to go there because I don't think I have to. Like, I think that mishandling the first one, to me, makes theory enough of a wash where I'm just kind of like, to be charitable to the affirmative, I'm just going to go somewhere else. I think the neg case is just pretty much just getting distraught. Particularly because, actually, ironically, because of mishandling the first shell is what stopped me from voting for the neg case. And at the point where you're misinterpreting, I mean, and absent that first shell, I think, the neg case just tells me states can't have moral obligations. Not an argument I like, but it gets extended. So that's why I vote. Oddly, I thought I was going to vote on the affirmative case. I agree with the other judge, like, on the roll of ballot arguments being mishandled. I think the case is just not getting answered substantively. So I think had the 2AR just gotten up there, just extend the roll of the ballot, extend all the 5 arguments under that would have been an affirmative ballot immediately. Independent, because I think the applicant is winning the arguments about why he's able to derive a moral obligation through using these exemplars that he's talking about, and all the Woods and Roberts cards are pretty damning about why we need to use these people as the bases for our moral decisions. So in that world where the affirmative, if the 1AR just extended all that stuff, that RFE would be saying, yeah, Keenan's wrong, right? Like, states can't have moral obligations. The way we get these moral obligations is through using these role models who are the only ones who allow us to do this through this use of testimony, which is inevitable. That would have been the RFD in 2AR had you gone for 80 ink on the 1AC frame.
Now, I will actually say I drew a line waiting for you to extend that. Like, that was all I needed to hear. And then it's like, well, there's nothing there. Oh, well.
Yep. So I just argument selection, the 2AR. Independent of the paradigm, I agree completely, 100% with what the other judge said. I think the lesson here is go for the easy kill. And I think for the 2AR, I think you were going through the woods when there was a very clear path to just walk 4 paces to the right. Like if the 2AR just said, look, theory's a mess. Go to the aft case. You concede the roll of the ballot. You concede all 5 arguments. Easier way to vote. Done. And we could all just get more coffee. That's all I have.
Few other random additional comments for the negative. Apart from if you just answered the roll of the ballot, I thought your 2NR overall was pretty good, actually. So like just those few small things on the theory debate, answer the roll of the ballot. You've conceded NC, just implicate it, like read a counter roll of the ballot, answer the roll of the ballot, read it, like link it under their roll of the ballot, something. And I think this debate is slam dunk for you. I think, and that's mostly related to, I think, the 1AR inefficiencies. So not only reading a shell that you didn't like get a clear violation for in the first place, but just like, I wasn't really timing, but like the allocation on 1AR theory should always be less than a minute, because anything more than that, and you're just going to drastically undercover substance. And in this debate,
it was more than 2 minutes.
Oh shoot, that's long. Yeah, so I think that sort of really played out here, where you get to the K, say like 2 perms and like that's it, and drop an NC. If like at the point you realize that one AR theory is taking this long, you might as well just go all in on one AR theory, or at some point in time before that, and this is the better option, just not read the second shell, or like just move straight to substance, one of the two. Like either all in or not.
And not all in here.
Yeah, it's certainly not with this panel. With me in the future, do it
Right,
what
like-
you want, but like but adaption. The final thing is on the PIX shell. A lot of the weighing for it seemed relatively new, so I would have been persuaded by like a neg argument, which is like hold the 1AR, like the 2AR to the standard of the 1AR, like I only get 1 speech to respond, and like this was kind of implicit when you were responding on the RBI's debate, because you're just like, it's really tough to be neg against 1AR theory. The additional implication should have been like, the 2AR is going to definitely collapse to theory because we know who this is. You should hold a pretty strict line on this, because when the AF makes this argument that I think is persuasive, that's like, you get to still K the refs, you just don't get to do it as a word pick. Well, that argument should fit in the 1AR, right? And like that argument helps get rid of a lot of your arguments, and you need to make sure that that can't be a thing. So.
I wanted to add one other thing. You guys need to layer the debate. Like, I don't know what's operating at what level a lot of the time. Like, you could take the AF to be a reps thing and layer it that way. I think that kind of comes out of your roll of the ballot, but I'm not clear if that's what you're trying to do, or if you're extending this kind of post fiat, and the same thing with like, the alt on the discourse, like that should be layered. Like, you also have a pretty easy option on, for the neg K, essentially, or pick, is to say, treat it more like a K, and then layer that above theory, right? Because reps are worse than theory, that's really, really bad. And once you layer it, I have a way to understand this round. Instead, I kind of have to hunt and peck to see things. And same thing on the affirmative, like, you could easily have layered roll of the ballot comes first, then theory, then substance. That's probably more efficient. Or even theory comes first, then roll of the ballot, whichever way you want to do it, but give me an order of operations on how, in theory, the ballot should go.
I feel the same way.